you call me, 'cause I can't go. Someone's wrong on the internet, don't you know? So this is our esteemed panel discussion on UFOs. Brian Dunning, Stu Gerbic, myself, Dave Thomas. So what you folks think?
About what? What would you like to talk about? UAP or UFO?
We could talk about UAPs for a while, because that's the hot topic now.
I refuse to call them UAPs, and I think Dunnings agrees.
Okay.
I think they're trying to make themselves sound science-y.
Yeah. And UFOs was kind of old hat.
Oh, cameras.
Excellent. So if you haven't been following Mick West's stuff, he does excellent videos on like the Navy UFO videos that are the topic of intense discussion for a few years now. And he's shown various things like bokeh is what you call it when you have a point source but it's out of focus, and the image actually takes on the shape of the shutter. So if you have a triangular shutter, you're taking a picture of a star and it's out of focus, it'll look like a little triangle. Or in the case of the pyramid video, a pyramid UFO. So Mick West has done some great work on those. He's got something called SitRec, where if somebody goes on TikTok and says, "Look at this UFO! I was on this plane from Kansas, and look at it!" So he can, with this SitRec, which is situation reconstruction, he can basically call up the data, find out which airplanes were in the area, put a hypothesized viewer in one of those airplanes looking at the other airplane, and he can show, oh yeah, this was flight 2917 that was seen flight, little commuter jet that was making a short run. So just amazing stuff there. And then I'd like to delve into like the whistleblowers. From my understanding, David Grush and the other whistleblowers haven't really produced any dramatic evidence, smoking gun evidence of UFOs. They're mainly talking about, yeah, I heard somebody talking about this UFO story, and some of these UFO stories have been proven hoaxes. So
I can talk a little bit about the whole whistleblower thing.
Wait, yeah. Can I pause just for half a second? What is the level of understanding here in the audience about UFOs? Because, we're saying people's names, and I have no idea if you guys know who David Grush is or Lou Elizondo. I mean, is this a...
Give us a little bit of background.
Would you know what that is? And Dunning, also, if you would, please, could you recommend, besides your awesome movie, the UFO movie They Don't Want You to See, is there another primer for people who are watching this video that they should watch that would probably explain the phenomena or the whistleblower?
Yeah, I would say there is a reporter for the New York Post, which I know is not considered one of our great journalistic sources, but his name is Stephen Greenstreet, and he's made a lot of videos on the New York Post YouTube channel where he goes into great depth and makes really good videos about who these personalities are and linking the whole stories together based on the personalities that created this. And that ties directly to these whistleblowers. And the whistleblower is such a stupid term because it's not remotely descriptive of who these people are. A whistleblower is someone we think of who works in an organization. He sees that the organization is doing something unethical or wrong, and then goes to the media or goes to the management or goes to law enforcement and says, hey, our organization is doing this, and that's not okay. So the UFO whistleblowers are portraying themselves in that light. They're saying, I was in the military, and I've learned that the military has these dealings with aliens, and the government's covering it up, and I'm willing to blow the whistle and call that out to the media. And that is just, my chair has been slowly shrinking.
You just caught on to that. That's pretty awesome. Mine's, no, it's not shrinking. Mine's rising. I don't know. I'm only kidding. I'm only kidding.
Whose nose is growing as he talks. So what in fact is the case here is that these are people who, gosh, there's so many ways to go about this, explaining this. If you go to a UFO conference and you got a room of 1,000 people and you say, how many people have been in the military? How many people are going to raise their hand?
A lot.
20%?
A lot of them.
Well, I mean, what percentage of the population are veterans? Does anyone know?
We have Google ability. Somebody could Google that really quick.
Okay, let's say it's 10%. I don't know what it is, but for sake of argument, let's say it's 10%. 10% of the hands go up in the room. You've now got 100 people right there who are UFO believers from the military. Any one of them you can put on CNN and say, I was in the military and I've learned that UFOs are aliens visiting the Earth. You don't go out to the military and say, who has learned from your job that aliens are visiting the Earth? You get no volunteers. But if you go to a UFO conference and you say, who's been in the military, a lot of hands go up. So that's where all these people have come from. These were UFO believers first, and they had some random job at some point, whatever it was in the military, second. David Grush was in Afghanistan. He was one of the guys who looks at aerial photography of troop positions and says, I think that's a tank and I think that's an artillery piece. That's why he's military intelligence. That's the extent of his experience.
That's the exact same job that Jesse Marcel, the star of the Roswell incident, had.
Yeah.
Aerial reconnaissance.
Yeah, and these are considered now intelligence people, and when you present that in the media, the average person with no previous knowledge who comes in and reads that news story is going to learn, oh my gosh, military intelligence officials have learned that aliens are visiting the Earth. And you can see how it's possible to come to that conclusion by putting the pieces together. But when you look at the order in which the pieces were put together, it tells a very different story.
And these are also, dare I say it, all male? Yes.
Except for Leslie Kane
and she is a investigative journalist.
What was her name? I'm pointing at a blank screen. Linda Moulton Howe, thank you.
Well,
yes.
Leslie Kane, she is an investigative journalist.
She's an author. She's a UFO author.
Okay, well.
She's never been a journalist.
All right, she publishes in the New York Times, but whatever. My point is that.
She doesn't publish in the New York
also,
Times. That's why.
You can't call these people out because they're heroes. They're military heroes. And if you call one of them out, then you are stealing their valor and you are just the worst scum of the earth because you don't like our military and our brave heroes.
That's right. It is very unpatriotic and politically incorrect, by extension, to call them out.
Yes. Oh.
And that concludes our presentation.
I want to point out also another really great resource is anything written by Mick West does a terrific job. When I'm on, rarely, but when I am on Twitter, X, whatever, Brian Dunning and Mick West and the Stephen Green.
And
there's quite a few people you can hashtag UFO Twitter, and you can get a lot of these links. I don't know how Mick West does it. To me, I mean, I get attacked, but my gosh, you and Mick West, I don't know how you guys manage. And I should just say, I'm on this panel because this is not really my area, but for some reason or other in the last 6 months or so, it has become my area. I've been drawn into this because of the work we do on Wikipedia.
Yeah, me too.
I've been taking down a lot of the Wikipedia articles that have to do with UFO incidents because they're completely full of details that are just to the minute amount. And they're based on, like, they got drawings, they've got graphs and maps, and I'm like, none of that is reliable source. Gone. That's gone, and that's gone, and that's gone. And then I get it down to the bare bones, and they're furious, but they can't do anything about it because I'm just following the rules of Wikipedia. And I wrote Luz Elizondo's Wikipedia article, and that was.
Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, well, you know how it is. But I do want to point out. Well, I'll say this in a minute.
Oh, okay. I just did want to mention, in case anybody here doesn't know, most people probably do, but my physics professor, Charlie Moore, when he was a grad student at New York University, he launched the Roswell incident.
So we can blame him or you?
Wait. Explain what you mean by that.
So I went to New Mexico Tech, and my physics professor was Charlie Moore. When he was a grad student, he was at New York University, and he worked on meteoritic projects there. He was in atmospheric physics, and so they had him work on keeping a balloon at constant altitude, and they actually published that in the open literature. But he was picked up by the Army's Project Mogul, which was a top-secret project to spy on the Soviets to see when they developed their own atomic bomb. After Pearl Harbor, we were pretty scared about sneak attacks. After Trinity and Hiroshima, we were really worried about sneak attacks with nuclear weapons. So the government was desperate to find some way to prove if and when the Soviets detonated their weapon. And so this Mogul idea, it was invented by Athelstan Spilhaus, one of the scientists at New York University. And I think he's the one that had a really popular weekly science column that the presidents got their science from this weekly Sunday Funnies sort of science column.
God, I wish presidents got their science from somewhere.
Yeah. But at any rate, so he had this idea, basically it was based on Krakatoa. So if you study the Krakatoa explosion of 1883, and it was heard thousands of miles away, and so they kept records of, well, in this South Pacific island, they heard the rumble 3 hours later or something. And so Spilhaus analyzed the data, and from the known speed that you could get from the timing, he could calculate the temperature, because the speed of sound and air depends on the temperature. And so he could say, oh, this air that these sound waves were going through was really cold, like 25 degrees below zero. Where do you get air that cold? It's up about 50,000 feet up in what's called the tropopause, above the troposphere where we have thunderstorms, but below the stratosphere where there's a lot of activity like sprites that are occurring there that we didn't used to know about. But basically this air layer between the troposphere and the stratosphere is like a waveguide for really loud rumbles, low frequency rumbles, and they can propagate around the world. So the brilliant idea was to get 3 microphones on balloon-borne platforms, separated physically, so that just like the LIGO, the long wave interferometer experiment that captured the black holes colliding, basically as the sound wave goes through one detector and then later another detector, you can calculate from 3 detectors where that explosion took place. So brilliant idea, and it tanked. It fell flat on its face. Basically wind was one of the problems. You get the balloons up in the air and they just fly away. So they first tried in New Jersey, and it was just too crazy there. So the Army said, well, just go out to Alamogordo, New Mexico. You're not on the ocean. Should be able to do a lot better experiment. So Charlie Moore and his staff were packed out to Alamogordo, and they assembled this 600-foot tall balloon. It wasn't, when the Roswell believers say, oh, we don't think that spaceship was a mere weather balloon. Well, this gadget was no mere weather balloon. It was 600 foot tall. It had 24 weather balloons for lift. It had 3 radar reflectors. It had parachutes. It had rings and ropes and all sorts of stuff.
Is it correct to say that the length was required because it's making an antenna intended to pick up a very low frequency?
So,
You need a physically long antenna for that?
no, that has
Okay.
nothing to do with it. They just had a sonobuoy. The height of the balloon train was just to get it up to the stratosphere and to stay there. So, if you have a balloon and it cools off at night, the balloon's going to drop like a stone. So that was, one of the problems that Charlie Moore was trying to work through. So, so they went to New Mexico, to Alamogordo, to launch from there. And one of the very first experiments in June of 1947, the radar reflectors that they used to track where the flight was, they were kind of flimsy. Back at this time, a lot of mom and pop companies participated in the war effort. We had, rationing in World War II and whatnot. So this little toy company in Manhattan called Merrick Manufacturing, they were making these radar reflectors for the Army Signal Corps, and the Army Signal Corps said, "Hey, they're too flimsy. Can you beef them up? Reinforce them." And the toy company had some tape sitting around that they used for toys, and it had these weird markings on it, like flowers and symbols and figure eights, just weird, fanciful symbols, and they used that to reinforce these radar reflectors. And so Charlie Moore, when he launched dozens of these things, and every time he wondered, why are they dulling up our radar reflectors with this silly lettering? But so the key flight number 4 that was launched, I believe, on June 4th of 47, they tracked it with their radar reflectors and the radar, and they could see it basically as the radar reflector spins around, it beams a beam back to the radar source, and you get a blip, a flashing blip on your output. So they tracked it to a town near Roswell called Arabella, and then they lost it, dropped off the screen, and that was the end of the experiment. They had no idea where it went. So meanwhile, my favorite part of Colbert, meanwhile, this fellow up in the Yakima, Washington area, Kenneth Arnold, was flying his plane, and he saw what he described as a series of lights that were moving the same way that saucers would skip on a lake. Mm-hmm. And so somehow that word saucer got attached to these weird lights, and they started calling them saucers, flying saucers. And
so they could have been some other instrument from the kitchen if he'd used a different word. We would have flying cups or flying frying pans or something.
Flying frisbees. So at any rate, this launched the country's really first big UFO flap, and if you go to the newspapers of the time, this is before the internet, of course, but if things could go viral, that story went viral. That summer of 47, every paper had stories almost every day about another flying disc has been reported. There is a $3,000 reward offered. And in the midst of this, there was a rancher working at the Foster Ranch near Roswell, and his name was Mac Brazel. And so we kind of think he probably, heard the news and heard about the $3,000 reward. So he was primed to think, hey, flying discs. And then he was out tending his ranch and came across this debris field. It was like hundreds of yards long and just little scraps of metal. And it was flexible metal. If you bent it, it would kind of straighten out. And what we think happened was when Charlie Moore's crew lost the balloon by Arabella, it stayed in the atmosphere. It floated around New Mexico, and then as the balloons lost air, it gradually sank to the ground, and then as it dragged, the mesquite and the cactus would rip at the balloons and the radar reflectors, and they'd leave debris, and it would get lighter, and it would go travel some more, lower down some more, get some more debris ripped off, and so that's how you can take a 600-foot tall balloon experiment and create like a 300-yard-long debris field. But the rancher, came out there on his horse and saw this weird debris field and thought, $3,000 reward, I'm gonna gather some of this stuff up and take it to the Army Air Force. So we did, and Major Marcel was the contact that he had over there. Marcel was an intelligence officer, Army intelligence, and his job was to look at reconnaissance photos and go, yeah, that's a tank. So he didn't really know about weather material. So he accompanied Brazel out to the crash site and gathered up some of the material, and especially the radar reflectors and the strange markings. Remember the hieroglyphic sort of markings that Charlie Moore was talking about?
On the tape.
That's what fooled Marcel, because he saw those and said, holy cow, this thing might have landed on Earth, but it's not from Earth.
Oh.
This is the flying disc. And I'm pretty sure it was the hieroglyphic symbols from Merrick Manufacturing.
At some point, I heard an interview with a guy who worked at the company that manufactured that tape. And he was asked, what did those markings mean on the tape? And they had the tape. And he said, man, it's just some random pattern. It didn't mean anything. I don't know. If it meant anything, I know nothing about it. It was just a random pattern.
Yeah, it had curlicues and various symbols, but you could interpret it with pareidolia as alien writing. So basically, Marcel was convinced. He picked up some of the material. He showed his son, Jesse Marcel Jr., in the middle of the night, woke him up and said, look at this stuff. And that's how some of the records of the symbols, they hypnotized Marcel Jr., and he drew his recollection of the symbology. Charlie Moore also, in his affidavit for the Air Force, drew what he remembered those funny symbols looked like, and they're an exact match. So basically, it looks like Marcel was taken in by the hieroglyphics, and so then what happened next was General Ramey out in Fort Worth, Texas. Well, it hit the news. Marcel issued, we think it was Marcel that issued the press release, we have a flying disc, Army has recovered a flying disc, and of course that lit up the airwaves, and all the radio stations were calling to get the report, and so the shit hit the fan. And
now,
so,
can I ask a question?
Yes.
Now, my recollection is that this was during the Cold War.
Yeah, oh yeah, right in the Cold War, the beginning, before it even really got revved up.
And flying saucers were now a thing. And so whenever something came up in the news that might have been related to the Cold War, or might have been related to the Soviets doing something with nuclear weapons, it was a flying saucer was kind of a standard government cover story. Does that sound right to you?
It sounds feasible. I'd like to see more evidence before I sign up to that. But
thus the explanation for the original uncorrected article.
I think there have definitely been times when the government said, oh, yeah, that could have been a UFO, instead of admitting, oh, that was our stealth bomber or whatever. So I think they've taken advantage of that, but I don't know to what extent they did that back in the late 40s.
That was my understanding for the explanation of why they published the first cover story on the first day, that they said it was a flying disc that had been recovered, as a way to just poo-poo it and say it had nothing to do with the Cold War and what we might or might not know about the Soviets.
So the government did have something to cover up, this top secret Project Mogul.
Yeah.
So we do think that the people in charge of that said, oh yeah, let them think it was a UFO. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's been just a big misunderstanding all the way, and people won't let it go because they want to believe or
So
they need to
that's an
believe,
interesting
and
story.
it's turning
And-
into a religion in some places.
Very much
That's,
so.
that's what I'm seeing as I'm being attacked, and it's a barrage of attacks. Now it's kind of dissipated a little bit, but the world is just, they've gone, I mean, it's ad hominem after ad hominem attack on me. It has nothing to do with Wikipedia, has nothing to do with facts, has nothing to do with the real story. It has become literally a religion. And as we said, it's a military hero worship in a lot of ways. Some of these low-level people who've served in the military for, could be 6 months, a year, or whatever, all of a sudden, they're not to be challenged, and you are to, they said so, so therefore, and the missing information is because, well, we can't talk about it because it's top secret. So, we can't. It was done in a skiff. And this Congress, good Lord, what are we going to do about these people?
So there is
Done with this.
One more important thing that happened in Fort Worth. So General Ramey, when the shit hit the fan, Ramey said, I want that debris and Major Marcel in my office today. So Tuesday, July 8th, 47, they flew him out there and put the stuff on the floor of Ramey's office, and they called down the weather officer, Irving Newton, who was just super excited to see a flying disc. And he waltzed in there. Well, first he said, I'm the only one on station, I can't leave my station. And he was told, when a general asks you to get down here, you get down here, soldier. So he did. He was all excited to see a flying disc. And he walks in and sees this, balloons and torn up radar reflectors. And he says, that's a Raywin radar reflector. We send these up all the time. So, and that was really the end of it. The press, radio all reported, it was just a weather balloon. And that's the end of it. And of course, the people in Alamogordo with the secret project said, we're fine with that. But they actually, in Alamogordo, they published a picture of the Alamogordo team launching one of their radar reflectors and said, yeah, this is similar to what they found over at Roswell. But of course, they said nothing about Mogul at that time. So Roswell died. I mean, if I've got UFO books from 1960 that say, Roswell, just a weather balloon. But in 1979, the late Stanton Friedman ran into Major Marcel, who at that time couldn't even remember what year, was it 1946, 1948? He couldn't remember. But what Marcel did remember was those funny alien symbols. It wasn't from Earth. And so Stanton Friedman took that and helped, and then other UFO authors joined in. And that's when, for the very first time, you heard about alien bodies and the autopsies and the calls to the mortuary. And so all that stuff about the bodies, that's all later than 1979. So it's basically an invented incident.
By the media?
Media certainly had a hand in it. Yeah.
Whatever the equivalent to clicks were
Yeah.
in the 1979.
Well, it was a cover story of Time in the 90s, and
What I have for the timeline was Unsolved Mysteries, the TV show, in 1989. They devoted an episode based on the original 1947 articles from the Roswell Record. Watching that TV show was Glenn Dennis, who's the guy who was the mortician. He'd been a mortician in Roswell when he's like 25 years old, back in 1947. And he then contacted Unsolved Mysteries, and somehow that got him in touch with Stanton Friedman. And Stanton Friedman worked with Glenn Dennis to reconstruct all of his 30, however many year old memories these were, and he wrote the article for the National Enquirer, which, to my research, is the first time the whole Roswell story was laid out more or less in detail, written by Stanton Friedman.
In the National Enquirer?
In the National Enquirer, 1991.
okay.
Stan Friedman was an asshole, too. Can I say that on this?
Yes, of course.
I've met him, I agree.
He and I never talked to him except over email, and he was just a dick. Pardon my French.
Should we take any questions? We have a question right here.
I'd like to move to the present. As you know, Congress has mandated the DOD to put a high-level military group together in the Pentagon, totally transparent except for classification issues. And they've been at it now over a year, and I think they've got at least an 06 colonel heading and possibly a general, so it's a high level.
You talking about Sean Kirkpatrick?
Can you bring us up to date on what it's accomplished in its first year and what prospects may be?
Yeah,
But repeat the question for the camera.
yeah. So what's going on with the current the government's current
AIP or something?
yeah their UFO committees and so forth, and there's been, I think, 3 kind of in series. What's generally happened is UFO true believers who are U.S. Congresspeople have tried to get to the bottom of this and tried to interrogate people and tried to find out what's going on with alien visitation. They've come up empty-handed every time, so they've disbanded that task force and created a new one, hoping for better results. And the latest of those is AARO, the AARO, Airborne Anomaly Research Organization. Is that approximately right? It's more or less, whatever it is. And Sean Kirkpatrick is the guy who recently resigned from being the director of that.
He retired.
He was just fed up. He's been on a lot of podcast interviews, so you can hear him tell his whole story and everything. But he was just fed up because he learned that the entire thing was being driven by this small number of UFO true believers outside of government. Lou Elizondo, Robert Bigelow, all of these names that go back years and years, decades, who have been promoting this story. And Kirkpatrick has been very open about naming the names and saying how they've been driving this whole story. And there's just absolutely zero evidence of any kind. And so I think when he retired, he did so in some level of frustration. And I don't know if he's been replaced yet. I presume he has.
They issued a report, right? They came out with 2 different.
Yeah.
They came out with 2. I'm sorry. They came out with 2 different reports, and the latest one I think was launched in March, basically saying what you said. This is just it's a history of a long group of people who have just been fooling us. And I just also want to mention really quick, if you haven't already subscribed to Center for Inquiry's YouTube channel, there is a fantastic a talk done by Mick West at SciCon, which I hope everybody attends this October 2024 in Las Vegas, Nevada. And he did a rundown of it, of the history in chronological order and explaining all the players. I thought that was a really great way of explaining, and I'm looking for it right now and I can't quite find it, but if you go to...
And we'll link to that in the notes for this video.
Yes, if you go to Center for Inquiry, you can see you are talking about the UFO movie. They don't want you to see, as well as I know Mick West's interview. If it isn't there right now, it's out there soon. Plus, there's an interview with me I'd forgotten on the UFO conspiracy on Wikipedia claims. It was quite ugly for at least 3 months I was undergoing, because I was just trying to report the facts, and they don't want that. I'm covering up, apparently.
Yeah, there's quite a few people on Twitter who cover this stuff very thoroughly. Jason Colavito, oh God, I'm going to be horrible in my skipping people.
Yeah, he's
Stephen
very
Greenstreet, Jeff Knox, Art Levine, and I'm probably missing a couple of names that I shouldn't be
Mick
missing.
West and yourself, yeah.
Mick focuses more on analyzing the videos. He doesn't focus so much. I know he's done a talk or 2 on it, but there's other people who focus in much greater depth on the individuals involved and their whole histories in creating this mythology.
Mick is more of a science guy.
He's more of a
Video analyzer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he developed Tony Hawk, the skateboard game.
Yeah. The funny thing is that's his background as a 3D simulation recreation software game developer.
Yeah.
And
Perfect tools for this.
Yes, that's the perfect tool you need to create SITREC, his software, which we show in my movie that we're going to show tomorrow.
But he's not ex-military.
But the thing is, he is so frequently criticized by the ufologist crowd for, he's just a game developer. What would he know? He knows everything about how to do this 3D simulations, 3D physics simulations in video. He is the perfect guy to be analyzing these videos.
Back in the heyday of chemtrails, he had a great site, Contrail Science, still there.
Still there, yeah.
That, and one of his best experiments was contacting hundreds of atmospheric physicists, sending them pictures of chemtrails from the chemtrail websites, and look, gaps in the trails, and they're turning the sprayers on and off, and crazy cloud trails and whatnot. And he sent them all these different pictures, the very essence of chemtrails, and said, is this evidence of a SLAP secret large-scale atmospheric program like cloud seeding or something? And again and again, the experts said, no, that's just variability and moisture in the atmosphere. And this one is a crazy rocket launch from Vandenberg, and super saturated air. You get these crazy vortices around airplane wings. And it was all just normal stuff.
I love that there are some photographs online of the interior of, I think it was like a 787, one of the newer passenger jets.
Yeah.
And this photographs of the insider, the whole jet's interior is filled with these big tanks.
Yeah. I know what those
no
are
passenger
for.
seats, all of these tanks. Yeah, they're doing like ballast testing.
Yeah,
And let's shift a bunch of weight to the front and the back, and then let's do flight testing.
They can't fly passengers until they verify that the airplane is safe. And so how do they simulate, the plane's flying next to Mount St. Helens, and everybody gets to the one side of the plane to look at it? How do you simulate that? You have big tanks, and you just pump all the water on that side of the plane,
and you get photographs that are proof of chemtrails.
Oh, I know it's true. We had a question from over here in the peanut gallery.
I have a question.
I think it's Radford.
There was a weird news story a couple of years back, and I never really got a fully satisfactory explanation, but I believe that Brian Dunning did a little bit of digging into it. It was the jetpack guy.
Oh, the jetpack guy.
Yeah. I know. Can you talk a little bit about that? You've done more on that. I mean, it's not a huge thing, but it's
there was articles that a guy in a jetpack was flying around LAX in the pattern and everything. And I talked to one of the men.
Was it a photograph too, right? Was there a photo, or was there just?
There was photographs, but they were super small, way too small and far away to make anything out of. Basically, they were just party balloons or some balloons that looked like vaguely in the shape of a person. But I actually called and spoke to some people at, I think there's 2 companies making jetpacks now. And I spoke to them, and they said, yeah, it's an old joke in the industry. Jetpacks can't remotely go that high or stay up that long. So it's not even in the universe of that it was possible that that was a guy in a jetpack.
And what would he be doing flying around LAX anyway?
Trying to die young, I guess.
Yeah.
Get hit by a plane. No, so I mean, that's just, there's so many of these cases that are explained by balloons. And that's one thing that, Mick West's website, Metabunk, right? Mm-hmm. Metabunk is, I mean, there's dozens of people on there.
It's crowdsourced.
Yeah, it's crowdsourcing, and they have very diverse expertises. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And a lot of these people just know a lot about what balloons are on the market. And pretty much any time you've got one, there's the chandelier UFO 6 months ago or so.
Jellyfish.
The jellyfish. And someone found what balloon that was within an hour. It's all posted on Metabunk. I mean, they're very, very good at identifying.
But they don't like that there are answers. They get very upset if there are answers because
they took away their fun.
Well, it took away their this belief that they're 100% invested in. And the only way I think we can really get anywhere with these kind of people is to get them before they start falling into that hole. Because if you are, and I get this in the psychic world all the time, they say, what is the perfect video? What is the perfect article I can give to my family member who's way down in the rabbit hole? There isn't any. They're in the rabbit hole and you're not going to get them out. You have to get them before they start to fall. When they start to question, you have a reasonable discussion with them and say, letting them save face, and you say, well, that's really interesting, let's figure that out together, and don't let them feel like they're stupid. And you have to get it at the beginning. Otherwise, this is where they fall.
I would like to say a couple of other points on the value of picking up the phone and calling somebody, because it seems so many bloggers, et cetera, no longer do that. And I'll just point out 2 cases where I've done that. This was one when I called the jetpack company. There's 2 other times that I've done that that's been tremendous. One was this week. There was Sterling, I talked to you about this last night. There was a case, I don't even remember what year it was, the Stephenville UFO in Texas, Stephenville, Texas, where people saw a UFO. The news reporters called the Air Force Base and said, did you have any planes in the air? They said no. Someone called the FAA. They said, yes, there were planes in that area. They called the Air Force Base and said, what's up? The FAA says there were planes in your area. The Air Force checked and they said, oh, you're right, there was. And I called the guy who he's the guy who called the FAA and then who called the Air Force Base back, and he explained to me what happened, which so far as I could find has not been reported anywhere else. This comes out on my podcast in a week or 2. What happened was he called the Air Force Base and said, on this date between 6 and 8 p.m., did you have any planes in the air? Now the Air Force uses Zulu time, basically UTC, Greenwich Meridian time. He looked at the logs, which was 12 to 2 p.m. on that day. He said, nope, there was no planes in the air. And then the guy called the FAA and he called them back and he said, yeah, you were talking about Zulu time. What about regular local time, 6 to 8 p.m.? Oh, yeah, sure, we had planes in the air then, no problem. So I got to report, I mean, I'm not the guy that did the original work, but because I picked up the phone and called someone, you actually get to find the real story. And another time I did that was the St. Clair Triangle UFO. This is a case where an advertising blimp went flying all over, where is that, Michigan or somewhere? Does anyone know? I don't remember. I do too many Skeptoid episodes. At night, an advertising blimp with big things on the side, I mean, it can look weird. You see that off in the distance, you don't know what it is. It looks crazy. It's not a plane, it's not a helicopter. And I called the blimp company, and this had happened like 25 years ago. So I called the blimp company, it's now a different company, it had been bought and sold a couple of times, and I asked, do you have any old timers who might have been working there 25 years ago? And they transferred me around, and I got on the phone with one of the old timers who was working there. He said, oh, that happened all the time. Every time we'd fly a blimp, the news would report it as a UFO. And he told me what happened was there would be like an NFL game in this city, and then an NFL game in that city. And the blimp would have to go from this city to that city. And whenever they did that, they would always take VIPs, sponsors and things like that. And they'd go for kind of joyrides. And they'd go circling around and hitting all the hot spots and sightseeing, basically. And that's exactly what explained this particular UFO case. And I only got that because I picked up the phone and called and talked to somebody. So you probably do that.
Yeah.
And not enough other people do that.
I was actually making notes as you're talking of cases where, again, picking up the phone solves the case, and it's like, yes. Anyway.
Ben said picking up the phone solves the case.
One of my favorite examples of a UFO case that was solved definitively, and it just has missed the collective consciousness. Hardly anybody knows about it, is the Phoenix Lights, way back in...
I think we have a Wikipedia page on that.
Yeah, the Phoenix Lights, there were a series of strange lights, and then later, after people heard, there were lights outside, and they went out and they saw more strange lights, and so the first series of lights was airplanes, and then the second series was flares that were being dropped from other airplanes. So it was a perfect storm as far as getting the public to go outside and see these strange things and conclude it's UFOs. And their governor even got into it. It was very strange.
The governor remains a true believer to this day, doesn't he?
Oh, I think so.
Governor of where?
The governor of Arizona.
Arizona,
Who was
yeah.
the governor when that happened?
Yeah, Phoenix Lights. So,
96.
but at the time, on the day of the Phoenix Lights, there was a amateur astronomer out with he had a nice big telescope. He saw the first batch of weird lights, turned his telescope on them, saw it was little airplanes. And Tony Ortega reported that, and that's been in the Phoenix Times for years and years, but they still put out books, the Phoenix Lights Never Explained, and the debunkers have failed, and
Well, they should read the Wikipedia article.
yeah.
I mean, what else can we do? You know, we got,
There you
you know, you guys got wonderful investigations, and then what my team and other Wikipedia editors do is we have to put it together in some sort of readable, without all the physics and all that kind of stuff, so the average person can understand the article and understand what's going on, as well as the reporters and the journalists who are reporting on these, so they can disseminate the information in a readable way to the public. And I just want to put out there, while I have a second, because we're getting really close to our time, is that the GSOW project has now written 20 pages that are UFO related, which is, you know, it seems like not a lot considering we've written over 2,000, but those 20 articles were already over 7 million views, 7144789. And let me tell you, there are a lot of people out there in the world would love to see the screen that you're looking at right now, because it has everything on it, and we don't release this information anywhere. And this is big. This is classified documents here, let me tell you. But one of the things that are one of our biggest articles that's ever been written is the Montauk Project, and we've got over 4 million views to that. In the last week, we have 5,887 that have viewed it. So these are all still really hot topics. We wrote it in French too, and the French page is way up there in the numbers too.
Nice.
But we're, you know, we have to get good information out there, and you have to get this cleaned up without all the junk on there. And people don't like it, but that's just too damn bad. That's the way I look at it. That's the rules, and we stick to them. So, you know, but that is our most viewed page, is the Montauk Project. Stan Romanek, anybody heard of Stan Romanek? Denver guy, we wrote a Wikipedia article about, I'll get you a second. Denver guy that we hadn't, nobody, absolutely no one. We wrote the Wikipedia article, and I thought, this guy, nobody's gonna read this thing. Netflix came out with a show for him, and all of a sudden he went from like 100 views a day to like, you know, thousands of views, and now he's already at almost 1.5 million page views.
Who is he?
Stan, he was not a politician, but he was a guy who wanted a Denver landing strip for the aliens, and he also has some bad stuff in his background that you can read about in his Wikipedia article, and he had a Netflix show, because it sells. Nobody wants to hear from us. They want to hear about from the people who's got these strange stories. They don't want people who are going to say, oh, here's the answer to your strange story. Your question?
I had a question about the Roswell incident, and Dave kind of touched on the metal, the bendable stuff. When I hear modern recollections of this stuff, they always mention the metal. This thing that you can try to reshape it. It goes back to like it was. You're trying to burn it. You can't do anything. It's like this magic. They talk about it like a magic artifact.
Yeah. You know? I think those are highly exaggerated memories of the radar reflectors. They did have sort of metallic paper, so you couldn't just crumple it like regular paper, and it did have some restorative properties, but I mean, you crumple it, it's not going to just magically, like the images you see on TV, and you go back to its original shape perfectly. But the thing that really sinks the whole Roswell incident is this scene in General Ramey's office when the weatherman came down and said, this is a Ray-Win radar reflector. And every single one of the UFO authors, in fact, this the Roswell movie that Kyle MacLachlan and Martin Sheen were in, pretty, big Hollywood movie. So they show Marcel humiliated, forced to pose with his crummy radar reflector. And in the movie, he says, that's not what we saw. And he's told, this is what you saw, and you're never to talk about it ever again.
I like your radio voice. I think you missed your calling, in the news. Yeah.
And so, but the kicker, the real kicker, is the radio. The guy that identified it as a radar reflector, Irving Newton, the weather officer. In his affidavit, he says Marcel was coming up to him saying, look at the alien writing, this is alien. And he was pointing to the Raywin radar reflector, the very stuff that he was humiliated in the movie to have to pose with, because he knew darn well that wasn't the real stuff. So my conclusion is they exaggerated it in the movie. The stuff that was on Ramey's floor, which obviously is a torn up balloon and Raywin radar reflector, that is the Roswell incident, and Marcel verified it by trying to insist that it had alien writing.
And they had some sort of, if I remember correctly, they had some sort of, when they had the container with the remnants, that was escorted by...
There are some stories that the actual debris did get to Wright Field.
Yeah.
And that somebody at Wright Field went, holy cow, they got a Project Mogul. Mum's the word. But that's about as much as I know about that.
Other questions? Right here.
Yeah, I'd like to introduce the effect of sci-fi and all this. Sci-fi. And I'm going to use Arthur Clarke as an example. 2001 Space Odyssey. Arthur Clarke was I think most of you probably know and probably seen the movie and so on, but he was trained in math and physics at King College, and he interacted here in Albuquerque with the seminal astronauts, including Armstrong and that kind. They came here to be vetted under Randy Lovelace, who was a space medicine expert. I think most of you know that. But along the way, Clarke, with his prescience, first conceptualized the geosynchronous orbit. Before whatever, you know that, I'm sure. And that is that if you have a satellite at 36,000 kilometers, it hovers over Russia. It doesn't go around and around.
Right. That's how our satellite dishes work now. You just point them to the right satellite and the...
I'm talking about the ones that hover over it. Geosynchronous orbit.
Yeah.
In any case, he have
Same thing.
Also in Space Odyssey, he, in my opinion, brought to bear artificial intelligence. Because if you remember, Hal took over from the humans when they got far enough from Earth so that he was Hal was the computer on board the spaceship.
How are you, Dave?
Yeah. Okay, but I'm just going to close with a bit of humor. Arthur Clarke, one of his most famous quotes, he was asked about extraterrestrials, and he said, "Oh yes, I'm absolutely sure that we have extraterrestrials." And the guy said, "Well, how do you know that, sir?" And he said, "Because they've never visited us." Quite prophetic. When you think of our world today.
Well, that's one of the points in Brian's movie that we'll see tomorrow is, suppose the aliens could have faster than light travel and we just haven't invented it yet. Where are they? They should be here by now.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? I just wanted to ask one question, and I've always liked to ask this question because it pisses off everybody, but why is the phenomena almost all male that people are interested in this? Almost every single one, and I'm fascinated by that. If you go to a UFO conference, if you see a line of people who are lining up to see anything that has to do with UFOs, if you look on Twitter, if you look on Reddit, everybody seems to be male. And I'm in the world of psychics, it's almost all female. But in the world of UFOs, what is it about UFOs? Why are you guys so fascinated by it? And why won't you just let it go? What's the problem? We have an answer. He just gave it to you.
In my experiences, Because I've gotten, since I put the movie out especially, the YouTube comments and Twitter comments and emails that I get have been a pretty fair spread, male and female. I do know from making science fiction, our previous film, when we spoke to all of these people who do a lot of appearances on TV shows, they always report that the producers want Indiana Jones. They don't want minorities, they don't want women, they want white men, because they're
Authoritative?
more authoritative, clearly. So I think that we see most of the white men because they get put in front of the cameras the most. But in my experience, the true believers who are out there are cut across a demographic slice like any other. They do not have a male-female bias that I've seen.
I'm not sure I'm going to agree, but that, in your comments, if that's what you see, it's what the total experience I've seen in the world of ufology. It's all male. I mean, there might be a woman or two sprinkled in there somewhere, but it is overwhelmingly just, I remember Mick West showing a video of the hearings. I think they had the Congress hearings, and it was just somebody going along showing people in line, and he said, what's going on here? It's just male, 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 oh, female, male, 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 male. What? No, I just don't see that. I don't know. I'm just fascinated by why that is.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of ways you could look at this. You could look at the demographics of who believes. You could look at the demographics of who goes to conferences. You could look at the demographics of who's going to go be in the audience at a congressional hearing. And those are all different questions to ask.
Right.
When I say who are the true believers, what I find is a pretty even spread. The others, I don't have an explanation.
I have, can I just, I'm not part of the panel, but I did remember, I think it was in Skeptical Inquirer years ago, I remember reading that it's women tend to believe in angels, psychics, astrology, the sort of the spiritual things, and guys believe in nuts and bolts. We believe in physical, you can touch it, you can, kick it,
There's also a differentiation in terms of the scams they fall for. Men are more taken in by the Bitcoin and financial.
And like perpetual motion machines and
Gadgets.
Gadgets, yeah, things that are like ghost hunters, mostly with the little BB things.
There's a lot of even ground in terms of the love scams, but then the women tend to fall for others. Yeah, I'm getting off topic here, but the gender differentiation is interesting. Maybe female UFO enthusiasts are just too damn busy to get out to the conferences.
Well, there's a lot of different flavors of belief in alien visitation or UFOs. That they are angels, that they are transdimensional spiritual beings, that they are people like us from another planet. I mean, these are all very different things. And I've never tried to pay much attention to it, but I hear all of those things, and I hear from a lot of women. So perhaps there are more women.
It might be just you, though, Brian.
It certainly is just me. This is my own. I said that to begin. This is my own personal experience. Maybe a lot of the women are more the ones who think that they're interdimensional spiritual beings. I don't know, but they are out there and they do believe.
I had a woman on Facebook who responded to one of my posts saying, "Well, you think that there's no alien life anywhere." Ever, and I tried to explain, I think there could be aliens. In fact, the universe is so big, it would be foolish not to think there's some. The thing is, have they made it to Earth? And there's a lot of reasons to think they haven't yet, and maybe they never will.
Oh, can we quickly mention that Brian's movie has just had 1 million views on YouTube?
Yay.
I think that's quite successful and quite wonderful. And we're going to see it tomorrow. If you don't get a chance to see it tomorrow with us, which I hope you will stay, you can probably find it on YouTube, I believe, right?
Yeah, it's on the YouTube.
As many views as a guy falling off a skateboard and cracking his head, or Justin Bieber throwing up on stage. I've achieved that milestone.
Well, we only have what we have, you guys. We have as much success as we have. Do we need to wrap it up here?
Yes, I think we can wrap it up.
Okay, so do you want to do that? You're in charge. I'm just.
This has been a fascinating panel. Thanks for all the great questions. Thanks, Brian, Susan, and
Tomorrow what?
the truth is out there.
Do your radio voice. Come on, do your newsman voice.
The truth is out there. So tomorrow, 10 o'clock. James Randy, don't you call me, 'cause I can't go. Someone's wrong on the internet, don't you know?